Longmire. I'm in the Global Studies Department, and today really is a historic moment. We're inaugurating, after a dream of how long, Mike? 35 years, Marty, Margaret? We are inaugurating the Institute for Peace Studies, and so it is an incredible moment as we also celebrate the Day of Nonviolence that commemorates Gandhi, one of the great iconic peacemakers of our time. But we also want to dedicate this moment to our dear colleague and beloved friend, Greg Beatty, who was the great peace builder in our midst. And so we thought we might just, Gandhi said, "My life is my message," and that was Greg also. So we know that he'll continue to inspire us as we build greater and greater circles of peace. So let's just take maybe 1 minute to thank Greg for all of that work that he did. Okay. And Greg's son Enzo and Greg's wife Mary are here with us too, so the spirit is definitely with us. We want to start out with some music. What a great and joyful set of voices we have with us. And thanks so much to Cindy Rosenthal and all of these wonderful, talented folks from the Drama and Dance Department. As some of you know, there'll be more of this on October 25th, which is the Day of Dialogue, where Cindy and the students will share even more of this unique and wonderful performance with us. But they're going to start us out again in the spirit of joyfulness and in the spirit of passionate creative energy, letting the sun shine in, and the age of Aquarius. Thank you so much, Cindy. Take it away.
This is Jason Bellinger at the piano.
When the moon is in the seventh house and Jupiter aligns with Mars, then peace will guide the planets and love will steer the stars.
This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, the age of Aquarius.
Understanding,
sympathy and trust abounding,
nor falsehood or derision,
golden living dreams of vision,
mystic crystal revelation,
and the mind's true liberation. Aquarius, Aquarius. When the moon is in the seventh house and
at one another, short of breath, walking proudly in our winter coats, wearing smells from laboratories, facing a dying nation of moving paper fantasies, listening for the new told lies, with supreme visions of lonely tunes. Somewhere inside something there is a rush of greatness that stands in front of our lives, our fashion, my future on films and space. Silence tells me secretly
United Nations worked for many years on the Millennium Development Goals, and there was a need to find new ways of assessing global progress that brought together environment, social equity, and development to enhance the long-term sustainability of the planet. My work pointed out that there were three broad categories of countries. There were those like Canada that were working on a variety of sustainability issues, many of them related to technology. They were working on things like energy use, climate change, and things like that. And then there were the countries that were working to get out of decades of poverty. They were working on education, environmental protection, reduction of corruption, and improving public health. Then there were countries that were in continual crisis. Many of the crises brought about to continual conflict within borders due to civil war, or to external conflicts due to imposed insecurity. And what was so surprising about that was how many countries fell into that list. It's shocking when you consider the world today, how many countries live in a state of continuous insecurity. How can you develop green energy if you're looking for the next drone or missile attack? How can you invest in education if a large portion of your budget goes to the military? I like to think of this as two types of sustainabilities within the context of surfing sustainability, which is the sustainability of the West. This surfing metaphor means cool and hip, right? It's the local food production, the green energy, the small houses. Sustainability surfers focus on technology and advanced tools to achieve efficiency. But then there is suffering sustainability. We have people suffering today due to pollution, inequality, and climate change and violence all over the world. In places like the Mississippi Delta, Puerto Rico, and Flint. Those in positions of suffering often strive to surf into sustainability, but they're constrained by external conditions that prevent them from catching the wave. That's why this Peace Institute is so very exciting. It will shed light on the benefits of peace. It is only through peace that we can build a more sustainable world. Now, surfing is not just a metaphor I use for a particular kind of sustainability. It's also a heck of a lot of fun. So as the Institute begins, I hope everyone involved throws on their board shorts or wetsuits, hangs 10, catches a big wave, and gets in the pocket and has an endless summer of surfing into success and peace. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bob, for all of your guidance. We are going to change the order of things just a tiny bit because we want to hear from Professor Lukens, Pastor Lukens, Reverend Lukens. Mark Lukens is here, and then after Mario and Ashish will have a few words from you guys as representatives of CCE. So I want to introduce to you Mark Lukens. He's the chair of the Interfaith Alliance of Long Island, and he is a longtime peacemaker. He is a pastor at a church, the Bethany Congregational Church in East Rockaway. But he is, as they say, a bridge builder, a longtime peace activist, and someone who really understands the deep meaning of peace. So we're delighted that you're here, Mark, to share your feelings and insights at this important moment.
I almost hate to admit this, but I actually saw the original Hair in 1970, and I apologize for bumping myself up in the schedule, but I actually have to make a presentation in a class I'm taking, which for you young people should either be cause for hope or despair, I'm not sure. But I do want to thank you all for being here this evening and for letting me have a little bit of your time, because this is so very, very important. You know, I was watching the documentary on Vietnam a couple of weeks ago on PBS. I'm sure some of you saw it. And it brought back a lot of memories. I turned 18 in 1973. I received my draft card about 6 months after Nixon's government ended the draft, and with it, a conversation that we had been having in my family since the Gulf of Tonkin about 9 years before. I remember I got my lottery number shortly after my draft card. It was 51, which was a moot point by then, but a reminder of how close I had come to having to decide what I was going to do, what duty was more important, whether the call of my country or the call of my conscience would win out. A decision that was made all the more difficult by the values of a culture that measured courage by the willingness to take up arms in the service of one's nation, right or wrong. by an educational system that I had been raised in, which trained me to believe that America was the exception to all the rules, the one nation that was always on the side of righteousness and liberty, and by a church that was deeply ambivalent about its commitment to the gospel and its own concessions to nationalism and violence, and the fear that was often referred to back then as godless communism, a boogeyman that for many church people had replaced Satan himself as the architect of everything that was evil in our world. And also, and maybe even more importantly, by the testimony of my own eyes. Eyes that saw black men and women and children being clubbed and beaten and bombed on our streets for the crime of asking to be part of the nation that their blood and sweat had built. By the graphic images of Vietnamese civilians burned by napalm or exterminated by frightened and angry young soldiers in places like My Lai. By the lies espoused over and over again by cynical government leaders, talking in vague abstractions about things like national pride and freedom, and promising imminent victory as the body counts piled up in the ambitions to self-determination of African Americans and the people of Vietnam alike were thwarted with weapons of oppression and death by militarized armies and militarized police, for ends that, despite all the flowery and persistent rhetoric to the contrary, didn't make any sense to me. War, my dad once told me, and he's a very wise man, is like a disease. It grabs a hold of a people, takes on a life of its own, ravages the bodies and the souls of everyone in its grasp. There is no good war, he used to say. Only good people who are swept up in its fury, losing their bodies but also their souls. Every war, no matter how nobly conceived, is always an orgy of violence and death. Every war destroys not only the innocents, but like the serpent in the Garden of Eden, also the innocence of those who are ensnared in its grasp. Every war springs from the ambitions of the rich and the powerful, but is carried out by the poor and the young and the innocent, boys and girls barely out of childhood, their bodies strewn over battlefield in places they had never heard of for reasons that they never truly understand. The enemy is other young men and women, their blood just as red, their suffering and their courage just as sure, their families just as broken, their souls just as blackened with the terrible demands that killing your neighbor requires. And as it was in my youth, my friends, so it is today, as it has always been, again and again, over and over. Those without choice or opportunities, cynically exploited by each new generation of corporate warlords and their government lackeys, becoming fodder for the military-industrial complex, feeding the epidemic of violence that has become for us, for most of us, especially in this country these days, just the way it is. And like a disease, the violence of war is infecting every aspect of our society and of our world. Even private citizens now wage war on their fellow citizens, using those same weapons of war to slaughter innocents in elementary schools, churches, concerts, on the streets of our cities and towns. But today is different. Today we mark the establishment of a new kind of institution. An institution based on a power even greater than that of the principalities, the scions of the death machine. An institution rooted in a power that is also as old as humanity itself, and I believe gifted to us by the one in whose image we are made. An institute based in the tradition of that great peacemaker, Mahatma Gandhi, and anchored in the most visceral and compelling of all human yearnings, that of life itself. Not to simply survive, but to live our lives in abundance, in community, in peace, to break the terrible cycle of violence and death, to change the dynamic, the mindset of scarcity and competition, with active nonviolence, and the courage to teach instead the truth. The truth that this world is a place of abundance, not scarcity, secured not by competition or bloodshed, but by cooperation, by distributive justice, and by the imperative to work together to secure a place in the sun for all of us, a place where we can begin to learn from one another, a better and more perfect way, a way that reflects the image and the will of the divine in each and every human life, the way of peace, the way of justice, the way of harmony between the peoples of earth. Blessed are the peacemakers, Jesus said in his famous Sermon on the Mount, for they shall be called the children of God. Since the beginning of time, human beings have sought to become godlike through the exercise of the power to subjugate or to kill or destroy. And we have become very, very learned in the ways of destruction and death. So learned, in fact, that we have turned our planet into a constantly boiling cauldron of war, where violent death hangs like a sword of Damocles over virtually every moment of our lives, where there is no safe place from its dark and deadly touch. That is until today, and moments like today, because today, the courageous faculty and staff and students of this university have, with the opening of this Institute for Peace Studies, begun the building of new hope and a new reality for all of us. A place where people may come to learn about peace rather than war, to learn to build rather than to destroy, to love rather than to hate. May it become, I pray for all of us, like the mustard seed, the beginning of something that will take root and grow, rising like a phoenix from the ashes of destruction and despair to create a new and a better way, the way of peace. So tonight I would just like to say thank you, Hofstra University. Thank all of you gathered here today. And know that the very future of humanity is in your hands. No pressure. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow, more sunshine.
Thank you.
So I'd like to ask now Professor Mario Murillo and Professor Ashish, if you both want to come up. They're two of the three wonderful co-directors of the Center for Civic Engagement, of which the Institute for Policy Studies is.
Peace studies.
I'm looking at Phyllis, who is with the Institute for Policy Studies and also does amazing work in Washington. So she said we might have to do battle over the IPS label, but peacefully.
Thank you, Linda. I'm really emotional right now. I didn't plan anything to say anything, but it's really emotional. First of all, beautiful voices, the energy, the spirit of the singers. Thank you so much to Cindy Rosenthal to allow us to kind of have a sneak peek of what launches in a few weeks here on campus. It's going to be beautiful to see that. And I swear my eyes were watering just hearing them singing. Too bad they had to leave, but I will convey that to them later. But it's also a very special moment. Again, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a professor in the Radio, Television, Film Department in the Lawrence Herbert School of Communication. Also teach courses in journalism. I also teach courses in the Latin American Caribbean Studies program. I work at the radio station, WRHU. I advise students, but I think the place that I've found home in Hofstra in the almost 20 years that I've been here is at the Center for Civic Engagement, and so I've been asked to say some words about the CCE and its connection to IPS, because in many ways, even though IPS is the brainchild of 30 years of struggle here within the campus, I'm not that old, I came here a little later. It is something that a part of the family of Hofstra that welcomed me from the very beginning, and I really feel a personal connection to Linda, to Marty, to Margaret, to Michael, to all the people, and many others, so many others who were involved in the establishment of the Center for Civic Engagement with always the eye of IPS down the road. And now it's unbelievable that this pep rally that we're having for the IPS is the official launching. And it's also I guess, very touching and emotional for me, because the torchbearer of this whole struggle and this whole building of this is not here with us physically, but he certainly is here with us in spirit. And it's very important that we keep that torch lit, that we keep that torch going for the foreseeable future, for as long as we can. IPS is, in many ways, it's the result of the community partnership that CCE has established with a lot of groups, but in particular with the Long Island Alliance for Peaceful Alternatives. For those of you who are not so familiar with CCE, we have sort of like a three-pronged mission, if you will. One of the missions is to, of course, engage students with on-campus educational civic engagement activities, lectures, forums, all these special moments like the Day of Dialogue, which is coming up in a few weeks here on campus, the Civil Rights Day, which will take place in the spring, and all the other major events that we do, screenings, performances, etc. That's stuff on campus that is interdisciplinary and important. The other component of it, of course, is the community engagement, being involved and working in the community. We've got to tear down the walls of the campus, bring the campus out to the community into the campus, as we see here, a lot of our community partners here. And then the third component, which is essential, is the curricular component. To tie all of that into all the different academic programs that we're all a part of, sociologists, philosophers, journalists, scientists, all the different disciplines, right? And that's what IPS is doing. And from my standpoint, it's the most important mission that we have right now, is to make sure IPS permeates every one of those areas, every discipline on campus. It's an interdisciplinary program that's meant to recognize that, okay, if you're studying business, hopefully you're going to do business, and you're going to look, if you're going to, okay, you want to make profit for peace. Through peace, not through destruction, not through war games. That if you're going to get into the political science, the world of politics, that you're going to be building peace, not going to be divisive. You're not going to be leading the world with the rhetoric of destruction and of division and of hate. That if you're going to get involved in communications and media and filmmaking, that you're going to create stories that build, that give life, right, as opposed to destroy and cause pain. And so that's what I'm hoping that the IPS does. And we know that we're always under the microscope of the administration about filling classrooms, about making sure we have students in the seats. Because all of us faculty and administrators we could fill up a room with ourselves talking about these issues. But can we get students engaged with these issues of peace? In a period when, 2 days ago, we had one of the most terrible acts of violence that take place in Las Vegas. And we see it again and again. We were reminded today by Phyllis Bennis that in just a couple of days will mark 16 years of war in Afghanistan. Nobody's even talking about it, right? So can we get, and that's our challenge, is really to get students to be involved and take the leadership in this, both academically but on all the other fronts. So I'm really excited to be a part of it. And again, and finally, because Greg Maney was really the torchbearer on this, I know myself, and I know I speak for all of my colleagues here, that we're all going to continue to carry that torch for the Institute to make great strides here on campus and beyond on a global level. So I thank you so much, and hopefully this won't be the first, this won't be the last, this will be one of many pep rallies for peace we'll have here on campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. I became involved in CCE partly because when I came to Hofstra, I was riveted by the kind of work that Mario was doing, and at some point in time, Mario succeeded in seducing me into being part of CCE. And that's how I came to know Greg Maney. And I became the co-director with Greg, and I started learning with him. And I have to regret to say this, that it's one of those rare cases when a student gives his instructor an incomplete. So Greg, I'm still learning, but I'm hoping that you've taught a lot of people on this campus well enough that I can switch the instructors and still be learning from you. We all remember Gandhi this week in some very painful circumstances. And I was reminded, because 2 years ago I was in Durban, South Africa, on a short-term Fulbright, and I got to have this amazing moment where Mahatma Gandhi's granddaughter, who, as many of you know, or maybe not all of you, that Gandhi founded his movement in the Phoenix settlement in Durban, South Africa. And South Africans are very proud to this day. They say, you know, you gave us Gandhi, we gave you back the Mahatma. And it was such an amazing thing to get a tour of the Phoenix settlement where Gandhi founded the Satyagraha movement for peace, to be given the tour of the place with Ila Gandhi, his granddaughter. And so she took me to one of the rooms, which was plastered with quotations from all the peace movement activists, from the apartheid movement, from the Indian part of the struggle for getting rights for the indentured workers in South Africa. And there was one particular quote that she took me, and she stood me in front of that. And it was not a very a quote that shed a positive light on Gandhi, because it said something very demeaning about how Gandhi thought of the Africans. And I wondered why she had made me read that quote, because it said something to the effect that the British were trying to debase the Indians to the level of the kafir. And the kafir is the term that was used by the British to address the Africans. And it struck me that Gandhi evolved, and he learned, as a lawyer, he landed in South Africa, and he was many things, but what he found out, what he was not good at was being a lawyer, but he was good at many other things. And as he learned, he grew in the struggle that he was focusing on in strategizing for the liberation of the Indian indentured workers against the British occupation. He lost sight of the fact that there was a larger struggle around him. So there were two things that I took away from that, and I think that the peace movement in the present day must learn from the evolution of Gandhi, in the sense that peace never stops learning. Peace learns from bringing down people who are on a pedestal, because we know they have failings, and they have failings that will prove to be, sometimes they'll be proved to be their undoing, but oftentimes there are failings that we can learn from ourselves. And the second thing that Gandhi did so well was he combined a sense of principle strategizing. And that's something that I'll never forget, learning from Greg, the idea of marrying principle to strategy. The only way you can propel them is by careful organizing, careful building of communities. And this is what I hope that the IPS, in conjunction with CCE and all the other grassroots and all the street teams that we have built over the years, will succeed in doing. So it's really a fulfilling moment for us to see everyone in this room together to do this pep rally. One more round of applause. Thank you so much.
We are amongst the best people, aren't we? I mean, this is, I always tell students who are interested in being Peace Fellows or in being CCE Fellows, well, you'll learn a lot of skills, you'll be working for an important cause, but you'll also be hanging out with the best people around. So I think you could get a sense of that from my wonderful colleagues. This is, as everyone said, the fulfillment of really a 35-year dream. I mean, Margaret and Marty are really the genesis of so much peacemaking on Long Island and certainly here at Hofstra. And so it is a landmark moment. It's a moment that's full of all kinds of feelings, both sorrow and loss, and incredible hope and optimism as we look forward to this moment. So many things that have been said about the Institute for Peace Studies have already been said. So I think I want to just take a moment to acknowledge both Margaret and Marty, who have done so much, and it's so... Any two people have done more for peace building right here in Hofstra, but absolutely on Long Island and in the broader world as well. And one of the great projects that Margaret specifically has moved forward is the project of Peace Fellows, an important component, a central component in the Institute for Peace Studies. As Mario said, we're going to be focusing on curriculum, and Andrea's going to talk about that in a minute. But it is all about the development of people's hearts and minds that is key to all of the projects that we've been talking about. So I want to just ask Margaret to come up. She's going to talk a little bit about the Peace Fellows program. But again, it's important to realize this stands on the shoulders of so many projects over these last 30 plus years that Margaret has been central to. So again, what can we say but thank you for that extraordinary contribution.
See, we really are back in the 70s. We're having a love game. And there are a lot of people who've had this dream for 35 or 40 years or longer, like Vincenzo and Andrea and others in the room that we need to share and have shared this work with. I should note that the Long Island Alliance came into being in 1985 on the 10th floor of the library. After many years of different groups working on Long Island, we had an organizing meeting. We said we have to work together, we have to build a peace institution on Long Island that connects the groups that are working, the churches, educational institutions, religious institutions, and it came into being with the Long Island Alliance. So, pursuing peace in our world and in our communities, on this inauguration of the Institute for Peace Studies and at our annual commemoration of Gandhi and nonviolence, we're so privileged to be here, and we're so privileged to be a community partner for the Center for Civic Engagement and an integral part of the Institute for Peace Studies here at Hofstra. I want to express, as many have before, my deep, strong gratitude to Greg Maney. He was a tremendous positive force here at Hofstra and was instrumental in creating the Peace Fellows program, the Institute for Peace Studies, and expanding CCE more fully into our communities beyond Hofstra. We are missing him now and will for a really long time. We're missing him terribly. So I wanted to just give you a little overview of how did Peace Fellows begin here at Hofstra. Out of the blue, the Alliance received a $10,000 request from the Norman Ackerman estate. He lived in Great Neck. He was a Long Island Alliance member. Somebody that I might have met, he might have showed up at meetings that we used to have at Shelter Rock or at other places. I didn't know him. I didn't know him. So we got this check, and our board met to decide how we could best use this unexpected gift. This is over 5 years ago. Our mission for the Alliance is to prevent, stop war, and to seek peaceful alternatives. It's closely tied to the UN Charter's challenge to save future generations from the scourge of war. So we thought it was fitting to fund a program that would allow students, the next generation of engaged citizens, advocates, and activists, to examine war, peace, and nonviolence in a kind of weekly dialogue and what that would look like. With Greg and others, we proposed the Peace Fellows program to then Provost Herman Berliner. The pilot program was approved. And the Peace Fellows program was offered in the spring of 2013. This is our 5th year, we just finished last spring. With weekly briefings on issues, with history, with trainings in collective, in deliberative dialogue, and on issue advocacy. Students receive stipends, and there's a PF coordinator. There's also on these weekly nights getting together chocolate chip cookies, so we brought some tonight. And usually there's pizza. So we know how to kind of draw them. There has been a strong faculty support and participation by Mike DiNincenzo, by Rusty Eisenberg, Linda Longmire, Mario Murillo, Marty, and I am especially grateful to the wonderful working partnership on all of this with Andrea Lagresco. we couldn't do it unless we did it together. The Long Island Alliance has contributed to Hofstra for the Peace Fellows program for the last 5 years, and we've made a commitment to do it for 2017-18 academic year as well. We've been able to do this from the original bequest, but also from grants from the Herman Goldman Foundation and from Long Island Alliance members. And from donations that we didn't have a Kairos dinner this year, so we asked our membership to make contributions in lieu of coming to a dinner to the Institute for Peace Studies, and they did. And then we hand that money over to Hofstra. So please tonight, consider making a contribution to the Institute for Peace Studies. There are forms and there are envelopes around. Make checks out to Hofstra University with CCE/IPS. We'll change that, Phyllis, at some point. CCE/IPS in the memo, and we thank you so much for that. We ask Peace Fellows at the end of the program, what next? We do surveys. How has this experience affected you? And some of them are here tonight to tell us. One of our Peace Fellows who's with us said she attended the negotiations for the UN ban on nuclear weapons this summer. And she said she met Hibakusha. She told us at a Hiroshima event speaking that meeting the Hibakusha from Japan and their relatives changed her life. A Peace Fellow left at Hofstra, went to the UN, and this experience changed her life, and in one way made nuclear war very personal. How many Peace Fellows are in the room? Okay. And how many CCE Fellows are in the room? Yeah. I want you to hear from the students now. So I'm happy to introduce 2 Peace Fellows to tell you what came for them after Peace Fellows, how this experience affected them. Natasha Rapazzo is a senior and graduates at the end of the semester. I don't know how we're going to do without her. And Emily Beck is a junior, and she's the coordinator of the Peace Action Matters at Hofstra Club. We'll tell you more about that later. Come on.
I just want to say that Phyllis Venice's book, we are selling it. Not only can you buy it, but you should. She is here tonight, and it's an honor, a privilege. Just buy it. So Margaret asked me to speak about how the Peace Fellows program changed my life, and that is my favorite topic of conversation, because it really did change my life. And during the Peace Fellows program, I was challenged and encouraged to think about conflict in ways I never had before, and I was exposed to parts of history that I'd never even learned. Peace Fellows isn't just a course, it's a community. During my first year at Hofstra, I didn't know where I belonged or who I would fit in with, and I'm so lucky that I found Peace Fellows and I was accepted into the program, because I've gotten to meet and work with some of my best friends. While being a fellow and being a program coordinator, I've had so many amazing opportunities. Being a part of this work and becoming a part of the peace movement has changed the way I view myself as a global citizen, how I engage with my community, and I know this is true for a lot of people who have gone through the program. And since the Peace Fellows program, I've gone on to work on winning political campaigns. I was an intern with Code Pink for US, and I currently work with the New American Leaders Project. But everywhere I go, I'm bringing the skills that I learned from the Alliance with me. I'm dedicated to social justice, and I'm happy with what I do, and I want to keep doing this work for the rest of my life, but I could not be doing it if it wasn't for the Alliance. Right now, the most important thing that we can be doing is funding peace and encouraging meaningful and critical conversations among young people about the state of our nation. My professors always talk about how Hofstra was so alive during the 70s, how our campus was a hotbed of political protests, mostly Mike tells me about that. But I know that Hofstra still has that passion. I can see it in our students, and that's why the IPS is so important. Sorry for this. But, we're going to be able to reach a wider range of students and encourage them to explore the importance of nonviolence and how the peace movement is going to continue to foster resistance at Hofstra. And it's crucial that we show students in our community and members of the world that Hofstra cares, and we're doing something to make the world a safer place, and I'm really happy to be part of it. Hi. So I was asked to talk about our student club, Peace Action Matters. But I kind of want to talk about, I will talk about that. But first I just want to say how the Peace Fellows really led to the creation of this student club. If it weren't for the Peace Fellows, I don't think that we would have this club, honestly. And I was a Peace Fellow my sophomore year, and like Natasha, it was really an experience that set the stage for like the course that I was going to pursue for the rest of my college career. And it really is a community, and this community that has dedicated their lives to peace and social justice work have become some of the most important influences in my life, some of my best friends, my mentors, so I love y'all, thanks for that. And so the Peace Fellows is a really incredible program, but it's limited to one semester. And so we wanted to create a platform where students could continue to engage in this dialogue and education and action on issues of peace and nonviolence and conflict. And so Natasha and Margaret had already started organizing meetings that were outside of the Peace Fellows meetings that were being called Peace Matters. And at the same time, we were introduced to people from Peace Action New York State. And so we sort of merged those two things because Peace Action New York State has student chapters. There are now 20, so we're one of 20, which is really wonderful. And as a chapter of them, so Peace Action is the largest peace organization that does like peace lobby work and stuff around the country. And as a student chapter, we focus on nuclear abolition, ending the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the refugee crisis, military spending, weapons sales, and other things that our members are interested in. And the Peace Fellows program made peace and conflict really personal for me, and I think it was really important in the formation of like my identity as an activist. And it showed me how directly my life is impacted by these conflicts that seem kind of so far away, you know? But they're not far away. And I think that it's really important that we take action to stop our government from spreading war and militarism, because it's really like, simply it's just the right thing to do, and we have the resources and the power in this country to demand change. And so we must. I feel like it's kind of our responsibility. And so that's what Peace Action Matters is trying to do on campus. We are trying to construct alternative narratives to the dominant narrative that kind of like normalizes and excuses violence. And we're trying to foster student engagement in peace activism. We are so lucky to have organizations like the Long Island Alliance for Peaceful Alternatives, Peace Action New York State, and the Center for Civic Engagement, who have really put a lot of their resources and energy into our generation and fostering activism among the youth and the students. And I'm just so grateful for that, and I'm so grateful for everybody who, for the last 30-something years, have been putting their energy into creating the Institute for Peace Studies so that we can continue to institutionalize peace on campus.
I just heard Linda Longmire say, we need to hire them. and you may or may not know, Natasha's ambition is to be head of the Center for Civic Engagement. But I really think I'm going to be working on her campaign one day. So I'm Andrea Labresco, and I'm in teaching, learning, and technology, but I also am head of the minor in civic engagement. And I've also been working on the curriculum for the Peace Studies minor here, Peace and Conflict Studies minor. And I have to say that Mark Lukens was talking about what age he was when Hair came out, and my memory of it is pajama parties, slumber parties in the 1970s that we were all singing. I kind of thought I should be doing Let the Sun Shine, but I need my pajamas on for that. And our hairbrush is the microphone. Okay, anyway, so So I think one of the constants over time has been that people ask at peace events for the last 30 years, as we've heard, they always say, where are all the young people? And I think we've answered that question tonight. They're right here among us at Hofstra, and we're really privileged to be with them here at Hofstra. As Margaret indicated, you know, they started with this 10-week non-credit course, and with a lot of different faculty members. And what they didn't tell you, because they're too modest to do so, is this Peace Action Matters Club that is now institutionalized at Hofstra. You know, it's a real club. It gets money from the student government organization. But in their short tenure as Peace Action Matters at Hofstra, they are being honored a week from tomorrow night by the New York State Peace Action New York State group, along with Harry Belafonte, Medea Benjamin, head of Code Pink, and LaDonna Brave Bull Allard from Standing Rock. You know, pretty good company. This club is pretty good. So the reason I think we're able to establish this institute now and to establish a minor, which we're working to do in Peace and Conflict Studies, is because it really became clear to us from the Peace Fellows' writings and journals and comments, as Margaret alluded to, that there really was a need for this, for an institutionalized curriculum and instruction in peace studies. And I just want to read you a few excerpts from some of the things that they have said in peace studies that really galvanized us to do this minor. More than one fellow characterized the readings as profoundly eye-opening. And the topics that they most often mentioned as important were the destructive power and danger of nuclear weapons, the connections of militarism and war to other issues, and the military budget and its priority over life-enhancing social programs, one of the things that Phyllis was talking about earlier today. And so here's one of the things that a student said. This made me acknowledge more topics than I had not contemplated previously, especially the seriousness of nuclear weaponry. A different student. I had never connected the levels of racism and classism to war and to cycles of violence in general. Moreover, fellows express themselves and frustration at not having been exposed to this material in their regular curriculum in high school, in their American history classes. And I used to teach secondary American history, so I know that near the end of the semester, at the end of the year, when Regents exams are coming up, people are plowing through the civil rights movement and everything else, and maybe blink and you'll miss nuclear war in some kind of way. And consequently, some of the students said this: I had never read one of Dr. King's speeches in its entirety before this week, and that was the week Mike DiVincenzo was speaking. The power of his words really made my heart swell, and so much of what he was saying is still applicable today, especially the concept of environmental racism. A different student. In my AP US history course in high school, we never made it past the Cold War era, so I'm definitely lacking in more recent history like Vietnam. The fellows also reported that they followed up on topics. Quote, after the meeting, I did some research on my own, only to discover that there were literally only 2 years during my lifetime when the US was not bombing a nation or actively engaged in war. In my 20 years on this earth, I have truly never known a time of peace, which is definitely a difficult fact to swallow. And a different student said, I plan on paying closer attention to the Syrian refugee crisis and the general role the US is playing on the international stage. This program has shown me that I have a lot more to learn about foreign policy, and it is vitally important to understand what's going on. In addition to content kind of topics, the Peace Fellows program also dealt with skills for discussing course topics, and those were new too, as it turns out. Each of the fellows, every single one on their sheets, commented on the usefulness of learning the process of deliberative dialogue. Here's a student. Previous to this meeting, anytime I was confronted with an opinion different than my own, that conversation would basically either turn into a debate or an argument. I would almost immediately shut down and label an opinion as wrong, unenlightened, or simply absurd, and never bother to learn or talk more about it. I realize now, however, that it is important to create an actual dialogue. And others talked about having the skills to analyze mainstream media. The media's intent is to generate views and profit from those views. So what is deemed newsworthy is narrowed down to meet that, resulting in the casualty quotient, which is that one freshman killed in an off-campus housing is covered over the 15,000 killed in a Honduras mudslide. And Mario, you should recall that when you came in and spoke, that's what they noticed. Ultimately, fellows were really eager for the Peace Fellows to be extended and institutionalized. And here's another quote. In every single class I have ever taken, so much time was spent teaching war. I cannot recall a single instance of being taught about any peace movements at all, outside of a brief lecture on Martin Luther King's peaceful protests. There are just so many major peace movements, such as the Vietnam War protests, that were just not taught. The United States was always constructed as a military force in my history classes, never a peaceful one. By teaching students about war, it is just a perpetual cycle of promoting violence. This is why I'm looking forward to the Peace Studies program coming. Being educated on peace and humanity is just so important. So you can see why we needed to establish and create a peace curriculum. And I too, like my colleagues, have to acknowledge and want to acknowledge Greg Maney's role in this as well. He was really the ringleader in this, and we all joyfully followed him, but it wouldn't have even happened now, I think, at this moment without Greg. So here's what the minor in peace studies, peace and conflict studies will do. It's really going to institutionalize what Peace Fellows has started. The Institute for Peace Studies, as you've heard, has been created with the approval of Hofstra University administration with this mission of conflict transformation, sustained research, outreach, education, mediation, and advocacy for targeted, marginalized, and vulnerable segments of the population. The minor in peace and conflict studies is the curricular piece of this mission. The minor is working its way through the curriculum approval process here at Hofstra, as it should, and we hope that it will be approved this semester so that it can begin in fall 2018 as an 18-credit minor. And it's designed for students who want to learn about and work constructively toward transforming local, national, and transnational conflicts, ranging from hate crimes that we see here, to gang violence, to terrorism, to warfare. It's designed to help them develop the attitudes, the knowledge, the skills, such as critical thinking, deliberative dialogue, constructive disagreement, mediation of conflict, necessary to handle disputes in a variety of organizational settings. It includes the possibility of engaging in internships that address direct and structural violence, locally, nationally, globally, including a potential future study abroad program affiliated with the UN University in Costa Rica, a Paths to Peace study abroad program run by Hofstra faculty where students would visit conflict and post-conflict zones. The minor can be paired with any major in an active way. It's intended for highly motivated students of any ideological perspective who are committed to peace and conflict resolution in local, national, global settings. And we assume that is a non-ideological wish, not one that falls into a certain party. Just so you know, it has two core courses. The first one is called Introduction to Peace and Conflict Studies, and the second core course is War, Peace, and the Media, which is really a must these days, it seems to me. The other 12 credits end up being chosen from two big buckets. One bucket is competencies, the skills of practicing peace, and those fall into various categories about mediation, conflict resolution, advocacy and organizing, etc., and internship. And then the other big bucket, it is indeed a big bucket. It's headed themes, and it has various things, I won't read them all, but development, environmental security, human rights, health security, international, transnational institutions, religion, peace and conflict, you get the idea, transitional and restorative justice. The best thing about putting this together, I have to say, has been finding out about some of the really wonderful things my colleagues are already doing. The really wonderful, relevant courses that they've been teaching for years in a variety of departments. So this minor brings those courses and those colleagues together in a truly interdisciplinary way that can only benefit everybody. You know, I've been thinking, I'm not sure why, but it came to me this past week. I was thinking about the end of the movie The Candidate And older people in the room just nodded their heads, and yet people are like, what? But it stars Robert Redford. Younger people are still, what? But the end line, he improbably wins this election, and his last line is, what do we do now? Well, as an engaged citizen, committed to peace and justice, and as an educator, I know the answer. It's curriculum. It's always curriculum. And the reason you create curriculum is so that the good work that you do is not transitory, so that it's here and it lasts. And it outlasts, you know, we're so sad that some of our Peace Fellows are going to graduate, but we're going to create other people who know about and are committed to the skills of peace and justice, because they will be people who have taken courses and have deep knowledge then, and can be the next generation of peacemakers. And they can really live Harry Chapin's maxim, to know is to care is to care is to act, and to act is to make a difference. Yes. Thank you.
We're excited about the curricular component of this too. Andrew has done so much good work on pulling all of these pieces together. We're so grateful. And now I want to introduce, talking about the future of IPS, Mike DiNocenzo, who is our own personal Gandhi. Some of you may not know that his birthday is the same birthday as Gandhi. Is that true, or did he just make that up? I think it's true. And we can't say enough, the night's not long enough to say enough great things about Mike DiNocenzo, who has been such a force, along with Margaret and Marty, but Mike has made his own incredible contributions to peacemaking in this whole area. So we are profoundly grateful and adore him, as I say, as our own personal Gandhi. And Mike's going to talk about the future of IPS.
My hairline certainly resembles Gandhi. It may seem ironic to have a historian talking about the future, but somewhere, I think at the National Archives, I saw the inscription, "The past is prologue." And I think we're all challenged to avoid being prisoners of the present. So what's come before can shape the kinds of things we do. Friday, the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize winner is announced. And I'm particularly struck by that because Hofstra has a special tie with a great Nobel Peace Prize winner, Martin Luther King Jr. And some of you who are younger may not know that Dr. King came here in 1965 and delivered the graduation speech. But he had deep ties with Hofstra and with Long Island that affect what we've done and what we will do. He was brought here by Harry Wachtel, a Long Island lawyer, who was one of two white people who was on a Southern Christian Leadership Conference Advisory Board. He was supported by Bernie Fixler, class of 1941 at Hofstra. And Wachtel and Bernie Fixler worked with King, and they organized his trip for the Nobel Peace Prize. And that association has led to a treasure at Hofstra, the Wachtel Archives, which have precious Wachtel documents and King papers and drafts of his Nobel speech and many other things that are significant. And as we were doing our planning, Greg Maney was going to head the Institute for Peace Studies, having been properly recognized with the position of the Harry H. Wachtel Distinguished Professor for the Study of Nonviolent Social Change. So I'm still grieved every day when I think about Greg's loss. So he was a powerful force in helping us to move forward. And he and I spent time in the archives going over some of those materials. And I just want to cite one example from those materials. and 2 examples from Dr. King's Nobel Prize speech that affect our going forward with the Institute for Peace Studies. One of the things that few people have known or written about is something we knew because we have the Wachtell King archives. And that is, and I spoke with Wachtell and Bernie Fixler, Dr. King insisted after he received the Nobel Prize in Oslo that he take a side trip to Stockholm, Sweden. And the reason he wanted to do that was to meet with the great scholar Gunnar Myrdal. King had been deeply influenced by Myrdal's book, An American Dilemma, that still shapes much of our life, the dilemma of an extraordinary nation, the United States, that had slavery and also had racism and apartheid and Jim Crow laws. How could that be? But what Myrdal had said and written, and what inspired King, was Myrdal said that no nation in the history of the world had made such noble, explicit commitments to democracy, to civil rights, and to human rights as did the United States. Consequently, and this shaped all of King's work, consequently, he said, everyone had a right to expect more of the United States than of any other nation, to ask the United States to live up to those noble principles, to close the gap between what they said and what they did, to close the gap between what was written and what was reality. And that's why when King said, I have a dream, which he said often, not just in Washington, he always said, and my dream is deeply rooted in the American dream. And the question, I think the challenge for us in our Institute for Peace Studies is to follow those noble principles from Dr. King. He believed that everyone has goodness within them. We know that they have evil as well, as I'm reminded by some of my colleagues when we teach about this. But Dr. King's challenge was, how do we tap the goodness in every person? And I was privileged to go to the Institute for Nonviolent Training that King did, and we're going to give our students more of those guidelines, which are still brilliant and applicable for today, about how you engage people with whom you have conflicts and disagreements, and how you do that domestically and not just globally. So that was always inspiring to me, and I know it inspired Greg, and it motivated us to go forward. With the Nobel Prize always announced in October, and that's given in December, and because of what's happened in those dates, I actually looked at the King's speech again, and it's very inspiring. And there are 2 things about his Nobel Prize I think affect the future of the Institute for Peace Studies. And they're kind of related, actually. One was, and something that's not as well known, King celebrated the involvement of young people. He recruited young people to come and be involved. John Lewis, as a teenager, and many others. Not only did he get them involved, but he brought them into the councils of deliberation and discussion. He sought their advice, and they radicalized him. They helped to move Dr. King in more socially radical directions faster than I think he would have done without the involvement of those young people. So at the Nobel Prize speech in Oslo, before he went to Stockholm, he celebrated the ground crew. He said, I may receive an award as a pilot, but there's no way I can take off without that support of all those people whose names you don't know. And especially, he continued to support young people. Secondly, he donated the money from the Nobel Peace Prize for peace education programs. So I think in those regards, we have some great standards to move forward on. Next Friday, as Andrea has mentioned, Harry Belafonte, who was a good friend of Wachtell and King, and it's been my pleasure to meet him and work with him and to share his hairline as well, although he was much better looking all along the way. He's being honored along with, and I'm so proud of this, I wrote about it in my newspaper column this week, with our own Hofstra Peace Matters students. So I think the kind of work that's been done indicates what we can build on. And I think one of Greg's special talents was being a maestro of bringing people together to work for a better society. So we have a great model to go forward on. Thanks very much.
Culture piece is so much what we need. So we want to just end by thanking some people. Of course, Phyllis Dennis, who spoke earlier today and is such a guide and an inspiration. Her critical thinking is matched by her activism, and that's a rare combination. Greg had that same combination of scholar, teacher, activist, and so those are, we honor you as well, Phyllis. Thank you so much for coming. Mentioned, Greg's Spirit is here. We are having a big memorial on October 23rd at Monroe, and so please come to all of that. He's with all of us and always will be. October 25th, we have the Day of Dialogue, which will be an absolute smorgasbord of activities, most of them focused on peace and conflict transformation. So please participate in those things as well. I'm sorry Cindy Rosenthal is not here to thank for her wonderful contributions. So much sunshine was shared by those voices, but also by Reverend Mark Lukens and all the folks who spoke. I feel like we're turning nighttime into daytime with all this sunshine. It's been great. And then, of course, we want to thank the CCE directors, Ashish, Yvonne, who's not here, and Mario, so important. And of course, the whole team. Mike and Andrea has done such extraordinary work in pulling the curricular part of all of this together. Of course, Margaret and Marty and the Long Island Alliance, which has been, the stalwart core and heart of peacemaking on Long Island for all these decades. Also, Kathleen Collins, is Kathleen still here? She's probably off. She usually is juggling about 10 events, so we're so grateful for the help of the Cultural Center, Honors College, we really appreciate. Warren Forsina is here. And of course, the Provost, Gail Simmons, is not here, but Bob, thank you so much for sharing time with us. Our former Provost, Herman Berliner, as we mentioned, was the person who really helped launch CCE, and so we're grateful to him as well as 10 years of important work with CCE, which was really in its foundational stage. Cindy Bogart, Professor Bogart from sociology, was really key and really instrumental. There's so many people, public relations, Lena Samuels, so many folks, and of course our wonderful graduate assistants, Kristen and Rosalie. Are they here? Where are you? Thanks so much for all that you do. So again, there's so many appropriate and wonderful Gandhi quotes. One is, of course, be the peace that you want to see. There's one that I love that I think it really embodies Greg's spirit too. Live as if you might not be here tomorrow, and learn as if you would be here forever. And that, I think, really embodies the spirit not only of the Institute that we hope to build and create, but also, of course, the spirit of Greg. So thanks to all of you for coming tonight. We have still some food to share, and coffee, and what else? Mostly, of course, good fellowship of being here together in this absolutely historic moment.